Support for this podcast comes from the Central Valley Journalism Collaborative, connecting communities with the resources, infrastructure, and networks to ensure a vibrant local free press.
From KVPR in Fresno, this is Central Valley Daily. It's Monday, July 20th. I'm Sarith Hawk. As some voters embrace candidates who describe themselves as Democratic Socialists, should the Democratic Party also move in that direction? One Valley congressman says not so fast.
I think it's a little insincere for people to run around and act like there's a burgeoning socialist movement when nobody's actually put themselves on the ballot as a socialist, right? These people have run as Democrats.
We speak with Democratic Representative Adam Gray about the direction he wants to see his party go. That conversation in just a moment.
Friday marked 1 year since Congress rescinded funding for public media. For the first time in history, public radio stations across the country were left without a key lifeline. We can't overstate the significance of that moment. But KVPR is still here, and we're not going anywhere. On the anniversary of the funding rescission, we're asking you to donate to keep KVPR strong in the Valley. Become a monthly member today at kvpr.org. And thank you.
And now to our feature story. Politics have felt more divided than ever, and not just between Democrats and Republicans. We're seeing different ideological factions forming even within the same parties. The Democratic Party is seeing this with the rise of new progressive voices, some of them billing themselves as Democratic Socialists. They have grabbed headlines in elections across the country. Think New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani.
In New York, three candidates backed by Democratic Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani won their primaries, knocking out two incumbent Democrats in a powerful show of force against the establishment. And to centrist Democrats, these wins are not just any Democratic wins. They're a warning sign that the playbook that they have been running on might not be what their voters want anymore.
And House candidate Malat Quiros in Colorado, who defeated a 30-year House veteran.
Diana DeGette is now the fifth member of Congress, or fifth incumbent who has lost their primary in this election cycle. The fifth Democrat, that is, by the way.
The agenda of these candidates focuses on the concerns of the working class and on fighting back against the major cuts to social programs that have defined President Trump's second term. But these progressive victories are happening against a backdrop of more establishment party politics. It raises the question about what the Democratic Party's identity really is and whether it can coalesce under a united front. I recently spoke to Democratic Congressman Adam Gray. He represents Merced County and recently helped launch the Promise to America initiative. Promise to America wants to move toward a more moderate or centrist Democratic Party. But can a movement like this rally voters right now, with the balance of power in Congress on the line in the midterms this November? Gray starts by telling me what his Promise to America pledge is all about.
Yeah, well, the Promise to America is a set of 6 principles: a competitive economy, safety and security, fiscal responsibility, effective government, common purpose, and patriotism, right? And what you're talking about is this idea that we're embracing growth, competition, broad prosperity, all the things that capitalism, which is what we have here in the United States, has brought us, right? And while I agree there's been a lot of attention on some of these races around the country, I would draw your attention because I think it's an important distinction to make for your listeners. I don't believe any candidate that I'm aware of has actually won an election as a socialist, right? There are some Democratic candidates who have said they embrace democratic socialism or the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, organization as governing principles or values that they embrace. But I think it's a little insincere for people to run around and act like there's a burgeoning socialist movement when nobody's actually put themselves on the ballot as a socialist, right? These people have run as Democrats. Right. And again, the vision that I have for the Democratic Party is a big governing coalition where there's room for disagreement. And I think it's important, though, that within that large coalition, that we represent the values of where the majority of American voters are. Right? There's certainly room for people to have extreme views on the far left or the far right in their respective parties. But I think it's important also that voters who share some of these common values laid out in the Promise to America are also represented.
I'd like to understand then some of the key differences when you're talking about candidates who are also running under the Democratic name, but some of their policies, how would they differ from a more moderate centrist Democrat, maybe in terms of healthcare reform or taxing millionaires and billionaires? Where do you stand on those issues?
Well, I mean, we'd have to take it issue by issue, obviously. And I don't know that I could speak for them on where they stand, because I think there's a lack of clarity.
But where do you stand?
In what they stand for. So like, you're kind of asking me to respond to something that what issue, where are they at, right? They're talking in these broad terms. On healthcare, like I think most Democrats, everyone should have it and it should be affordable, right? And we need to work within our society to make sure that that broad prosperity, which is listed here, as a principle in the Promise to America, is available to everyone, right? And I think efforts like the Affordable Care Act and others have sought to expand the safety net, right, of healthcare, ensure every family, can afford to have good healthcare. And I don't think that's a extreme left view. I think that's a pretty mainstream Democratic view. I don't think you'll find a Democrat in Congress today that doesn't support some version of making sure every American has healthcare.
And, with the second Trump administration in place right now, we're seeing really major shifts and changes to those issues. And I think that's what a lot of voters are responding to when you're talking about the economy and affordability and access to health care.
Well, I think that's a really important point. I mean, like H.R. 1 made devastating cuts to our healthcare infrastructure, right? I actually have a piece of legislation in response to H.R. 1 that reverses all of the cuts to the Medicaid program, as well as restores permanently the tax credits. Right. And again, I think that's pretty mainstream Democratic stuff. And I hope that the voters this November, regardless of whether they live in New York or in my district in Merced or anywhere, across the country, vote for Democrats who are going to reverse, those Trump cuts that are bad for our economy and bad for Americans.
And because, some of the policy changes that we're seeing are extreme movements to the right, things that we haven't seen in a long time as far as cuts. Do you think that what your coalition is doing as far as response, staying more, big tent party, is that the right level of response? Or what we're seeing with some of these more quote unquote socialist candidates, is that more of a reaction to what's happening?
Oh, I think it's certainly a reaction, right? But I also think, again, in this social media, 15-second soundbite world we live in, we shouldn't let things spiral out of control, our narrative of them, right? In the sense that, New York electing some of the most far left, liberal, progressive, whatever word you want to use, members, I don't think if you're being objective and intellectually honest, that's a new thing. Right, I think that's probably gone on in every election. Right, these are some of the most liberal places, in the country, so to speak, with constituents who lean in that direction. But I think well beyond New York, there are people across the country who are extraordinarily frustrated with the Trump administration, extraordinarily frustrated, with tariffs that change every other week, that ultimately drive up inflation, everything from the cost of food to the cost of gasoline. A Congress increasingly dominated by the extreme right, a Speaker of the House who placates the most extreme right members. But a lot of what I think those Americans are saying is that they do want more centrists right? Both in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And they want people that are governing in a way that makes government work for them and that addresses the issues they have. And there are obviously different perspectives on how to address those issues. I welcome any perspective that some of our more progressive or liberal or urban colleagues have. And I would hope that they would welcome my perspective, right? And a lot of my perspective is laid out, broadly. These are just talking points and principles, and obviously we got to look at each issue separately. But I would hope that folks on the far left would welcome the opinion of the majority of Democrats who are in the middle, and then work together to address what I think is our shared frustration with an out-of-control Trump administration.
I'd like to go back a little bit to last November. We were one of only 6 House Democrats and the only one from California who voted with Republicans in favor of a deal to end the government shutdown. Does being in this position of being big tent, more centrist, does that mean breaking Democratic ranks to join Republicans?
Well, I'm certainly a member of a political party, but I never joined a cult. So I'm not here to serve the Democratic Party in Congress. I share the values. I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I share a lot of values with other Democrats. But fundamentally, we live in a democracy where I was elected to represent my district, right? And when my district's interests and some other district interests, maybe also represented by a Democrat, don't align, I should fight for my district. I should speak up for my district, and so should they, right? And it doesn't make one of us right or wrong. I was one of the few Democrats on the issue. There was some people decided to, make a vote that I think was more on principle or virtue signaling in a sense than it was practical. When it became clear to me after, and I voted to hold the line on the Trump administration for, I think it was 6 weeks. I'd have to go back and look, but that was quick. And there were many votes in between. But ultimately, when Trump, despite the courts and Congress and others telling him he needed to send money to the food banks and some of these programs, and when I realized that the president was completely comfortable, the Republicans were completely comfortable holding hostage the American people that benefit from those programs. And these are some of the poorest folks and the most needy, in a sense, in our society. I don't think that's the right pawn to have in the middle of a political fight. And I said so. I said that, President, I actually wrote an op-ed that you could go and look at. I think it printed in the Turlock Journal in my district, just articulating why I made that vote, right? That it was not the right thing to do to just hold these people hostage, unable to secure food assistance and other things. At the end of the day, my job isn't to win an argument. It's to make people's lives better. And I certainly have every confidence that when I voted to open the government and make sure, that folks receive those benefits, that was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and then we are already seeing cuts to SNAP benefits that are going to happen this fall. We're going to be seeing healthcare premiums going up. Do you think that this direction that the Democrats are going, that you want to go towards, moving more centrist, is working? Right now, we're seeing 15 people who have signed on to the pledge, and you're the only one from California.
Yeah, they just got started with this. And as I'm sure you're aware, there's a group of young people that are out talking to elected officials at every level of government. I've certainly been talking to some other folks and anticipate that some of my California colleagues are going to be joining in this effort. But it is at its very, the beginning of this movement. But I think it's an important movement, and it's good to be here today talking to you about it. And I hope that appearing on your program will give more people an opportunity to be exposed to these ideas, look into these ideas, and certainly support these ideas if they agree with them.
Well, we appreciate the open conversation about this. Congressman Adam Gray, representing California's 13th Congressional District, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate the opportunity.
And that's today's show. Today's episode was produced by Jonathan Linden and KVPR. I'm Sarith Hawk. Find the latest local news anytime at kvpr.org.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.